My name is Kate Lesslar and I'm the Professional Practice Lead with the Royal College of Occupational Therapists. I'm going to give a very general overview in relation to occupational therapy. Lorraine is a myalgic encephalomyelitis chronic fatigue syndrome occupational therapist program lead in the Northern Trust, and she is going to speak about self-management advice after I have finished. The Royal College of Occupational Therapists is the professional body representing occupational therapy staff across the UK. It sets the professional and educational standards for occupational therapy and provides leadership, guidance and information relating to research and development, education, practice and lifelong learning to members. We also represent occupational therapists at a political level to make sure that policymakers and elected representatives know about occupational therapy for the benefit of service users. In practice, we ensure the occupational therapy profession is focused on helping to improve the health and well-being of the population and make the public aware of how occupational therapy can benefit individuals and make a positive difference to their lives. As you can see in this slide, occupational therapists work with a wide range of people of all ages. Our aim is to enable people to carry out the occupations they need or want to do every day. Supporting people to self-manage is one of the core principles of occupational therapy. Occupational therapists take a very holistic approach. They take into account all of the multifaceted elements related to the person, their occupations and the environment they're in. They consider the relationship between what a person does, that's their occupations, how a condition, illness or disability impacts upon them, and how the environment supports or hinders their activity. Using this approach and working with the person, occupational therapists find solutions or ways to help people re-engage or participate as fully as possible in daily life. This could be in activities of daily living, such as showering, instrumental activities of daily living such as shopping, work, education, or other productive activities. It could be social or leisure activities or maintaining roles and responsibilities. It is very person-focused and very much about what matters to you and less about what is the matter with you. When people develop a condition in life, there is a sense of losing control because they are no longer able to do their normal everyday activities, or they are proving more challenging. Adapting to the change itself can be tough, as well as frustration about not being able to do things. And you don't think about it until it happens. But if anyone here, for example, has broken a leg or an arm, you know how difficult it is to do day-to-day activities which you once took for granted. This disability is generally short-lived. If a condition lasts a long time, it is so much more challenging. And people want to get that sense of control back into their lives through still being able to do their everyday activities or other occupations we mentioned earlier. It may be that life is going to be living with a condition. Sorry, I just missed that slide. I saw this in our recent occupational therapy news in a story about occupational therapists who got long COVID. And it made me think about how much people with conditions have to adjust and readjust to what is a new world to the one they had thought was going to be the future. And it may be that life is going to be living with a condition, but it's so important to remember that one of the principles of the World Health Organization Constitution is that the enjoyment of the highest attainable standard of health is one of the fundamental rights of every human being. And just some thoughts for the future for going forward, because I've been thinking about this whole area preparing for this. And I suppose one of the key things I think to aim for here in Northern Ireland is to establish equitable services to support people with ME/CFS, along with development of resources such as a trained workforce and reliable, high quality information. I will pass on now to Lorraine, who, as well as working as the ME/CFS programme lead in the Northern Trust, has just taken up an advanced practitioner occupational therapist post in Belfast, where she will continue to work with people with ME/CFS as part of her caseload. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kate, for that introduction to my session this afternoon. So as Kate was saying, I work as an occupational therapist in the Northern Trust, I work on the ME-CFS programme, and I also work on our pain management programme, and I've recently taken up a new post as advanced practitioner within the Belfast Trust. So I'm going to be working now across 2 trusts in Northern Ireland. And I have been working with people who have a diagnosis of ME-CFS for a number of years now. And through that time, I feel I've developed some expertise and increased understanding of the complex condition that is ME-CFS. And what I want to do today is to share with you some information that I provide in the programme in the Northern Trust to people who have been diagnosed with ME-CFS, and give an overview of the role of occupational therapy, the important role of occupational therapy in supporting self-management of people who have ME-CFS. So if we think for a moment, Kate was talking a little bit about occupational therapy and how it deals with helping individuals with their day-to-day activities and their function. And if we think for a moment about ME-CFS specifically, we know that ME-CFS is a complex, chronic, multi-systemic illness with symptoms that fluctuate in intensity and severity and affect ability to engage in all occupations. So that includes personal and domestic activities of daily living. It includes work and occupation, and it includes leisure, social activities, and maintaining roles and responsibilities. So I want to just take you for a moment to the words of Dr. Charles Shepherd, who is the medical advisor to the ME Association. And I feel that his words are a key aspect of thinking about the overall management, self-management of ME-CFS. And he says that trying to achieve the correct balance between appropriate amounts of rest and activity, both physical and mental, is the most important aspect of ME-CFS management, but it can be one of the most difficult to achieve. So many clients would talk about the difficulties with the balance between rest and activity, and knowing when to stop and knowing when to make changes and adapt their activity. So thinking about occupational therapy then for a moment. So occupational therapists' unique skills include helping people to do the activities they need or want to do. So as Kate was referring to there, it's important about the person's diagnosis and their health condition. However, what's most important for the person is what kind of activities and what kind of things that they want to do and occupations they want to do within their lives as well. So occupational therapists have skills in activity analysis, and the principle underlying occupational therapy is that all humans are occupationally driven. We all need to be doing, and we're all doers. And when we have difficulties in doing, we can struggle with that greatly. Occupational therapists are also great believers in activity, using activity as therapy, therapeutically, and we're experts in the assessment of function. And occupations, many different occupations, can help improve our sense of well-being. So what strategies then are available to occupational therapy to use when helping people with ME-CFS? So the use of pacing, grading, energy conservation, activity analysis, and goal setting is a key component of any program, any help that somebody with ME-CFS needs. And occupational therapists have also experience in lifestyle management, and we can advise regarding managing stress, managing sleep, and assertiveness. And we might wonder for a moment, why would we be thinking about advising somebody with ME-CFS on these different areas of lifestyle management? And managing stress, for one, is that my experience with clients who have a diagnosis of ME-CFS is that when previously their ability to manage stress has been compromised because of having ME-CFS diagnosis and the complexity that that does to the body. Therefore, needing some help to manage the stress is very much about switching on that rest and digest system within the body. And sleep is highly important in terms of regulating activity and routine in a person's day. And assertiveness really comes in relation to communicating with a person's important other social circle and important people around them, and also with healthcare professionals about their health, and that the person with the diagnosis is the best judgment of how they're feeling at any one point in time. So activity analysis then includes these areas, for example, speed, strength, the complexity of an activity. So something that maybe would seem quite straightforward can have many different components to be able to do that particular activity. And examples of that, for example, could be driving. And for people who are drivers, and we all know how, you know, we drive like it's second nature sometimes when we learn to drive. However, actually, if we take a wee look at that activity, it's pretty complex in terms of both physical and cognitive skills needed, and resistance and time and how long it takes to do particular types of activities. So seemingly straightforward activities can become more complex when living with ME/CFS. And an example of that might be, for example, taking a shower. So anybody might say, well, that's just having a shower. But actually, because of ME/CFS in particular in relation to this condition, having issues regarding temperature regulation and so on, it makes it a very high energy activity and can be for that person in time. Having a cup of coffee with a friend, maybe just be thinking about having a cup of coffee with a friend, but actually cognitively, that requires quite skilled and quite a high level of cognitive focus to that task in social contact as well. So pacing is a very useful strategy that is used in ME/CFS management and also in other chronic illnesses and chronic conditions to help in terms of managing activity. So pacing means change to the way in which all activities are carried out. And change can be hard, it can be a challenge. And our human nature is that we do things we want to do because we do them the way we do them because that's the way we've always done it. And actually beginning to change how we do and how we go about our activities requires a lot of rethinking and rejigging of all different types of activities. So it's easy to say, but it's harder to do in practice. We also have to think about the lure of the good day. So when I was referring back there to good days and bad days and peaks and troughs and fluctuations in symptoms, a person may always have that lure of the good day when they feel better and they feel able to do more. However, what we know and understand about the condition is that that can then exacerbate post-exertional malaise. We also have our expectations of ourselves, and we have others' expectations of us. And pacing is not a quick fix. It's time and patience that's needed. Acceptance of the illness can help in making the changes that are needed going forward. So adapting the do's really means something that we use in our program a lot is the 4 Ds, and that's the do, the delay, the delegate, and the ditch. So when anybody's thinking about their day and their activities, there's the do's, and the do's are the bits that we prioritize and that we need to adapt then to enable us to get them done. The delay, the delegate, and the ditch are just that, delaying things to a later date, delegating them for help with somebody else, or maybe ditching them altogether if we're really lucky. And then also in terms of adapting is something called the 3 Ps, and that's pace, plan, and prioritize. And the 3 Ps are very much involved in thinking about how somebody would conserve the limited energy that they have to manage throughout the day. So there is a link below there to the Royal College of OT's document regarding conserving energy. Now that has been written more specifically to help somebody with long COVID. However, I very much feel that all that's in that document, it's a very readable document, and all that's in that would be very helpful to somebody with a diagnosis of ME/CFS too. So equipment can be a way of adapting activity, and referral to community occupational therapy can often be considered. Provision of equipment can help an activity to be adapted, and provision of equipment can enable a person to complete their activities independently. An example of that might be a perching stool for use in the kitchen for kitchen activities, a relator for helping with mobility and being able to sit and rest in between walking, a bed lever, or also other smaller pieces of equipment. Employment and vocation is a huge area to think about and consider regarding ME/CFS. So I'm really just touching on that today in terms of people knowing and understanding that ME/CFS would meet the definition of disability under the Equality Act 2000 and 10. And an occupational therapist may be involved in advising on activity management techniques to use at work, and also help to access Department for Community programs such as Workable, Access to Work, and Job Match. In-work assessment of job demands and advice going forward on reasonable adjustments within the workplace. So just briefly, the ME/CFS programme in the Northern Trust. This programme is based upon the original programme that was designed by Sue Pemberton, who many of you may have heard about. She's done some excellent work in working in both ME/CFS management and also other fatigue issues and fatigue conditions. And she heads up a clinic, the Yorkshire Fatigue Clinic over in England. And this programme is an 8-week programme, group or individual, with 3-month, 6-month follow-up. It's flexible, guided by patient need. There's limited capacity for longer term review appointments, and we use the model of dysregulation. And as I say, it's based on the original programme designed by Sue Pemberton, Yorkshire Fatigue Clinic, and I was fortunate enough to work with her many years ago, back in Leeds in 1994. So there's just a bit of information about the dysregulation model, and certainly it's really a really good read, and it helps somebody really understand a bit more about what might be going on to explain the multitude of symptoms people with ME/CFS experience. And that is the programme in itself in terms of the 8 sessions. And we have on our programme within the Northern Trust, we have some input from our physiotherapist who leads the session regarding exercise with ME/CFS. And in that component, we discuss about heart rates and heart rate monitoring and appropriate exercise and staying within our moderate heart rate level. And I know from these webinars, there's a previous webinar that was led by Physios for ME, which will go into more detail regarding heart rates and heart rate monitoring. Diet and nutrition is led by our dietitian who works on the condition management programme. Rest and sleep, managing stress and managing setbacks. And this programme is specifically for people with an ME/CFS diagnosis. So there is some feedback from our programme. I'm going to click on for this because I know we're limiting our time today, but it's just some of the comments from people who've participated in our programme in the past. And the NICE guidelines, our programme actually, we made it into the NICE guidelines that hopefully are being due for publication again very shortly, the revised guidelines. And our write-up of our evaluation of our 8-week group programme for the ME/CFS was accepted into the evidence reviews for non-pharmacological management of ME/CFS. So we were very pleased to be able to contribute to the NICE guidelines that are hopefully due out shortly. Key points from revision of NICE guidelines: CBT and GET no longer can recommend as treatment for ME/CFS. CBT is helpful only for helping a person with ME/CFS and adapting to the changes brought about by having the illness. The need for flexible, individually tailored approach for any specialist programme, and that occupational therapy and physiotherapists have experience in ME/CFS specifically before working with somebody with this complex condition. And there's just a list of some of the research priorities from NICE. And post-exertional malaise, I wanted just to mention that today because we've probably heard a bit more about that in the other webinars that have been part of the sessions. But just to mention that it's a key defining symptom of ME/CFS, and it separates it from other conditions where chronic fatigue is present. And post-exertional malaise now being identified in people who have developed long COVID. Post-exertional malaise, that all activity needs to be very carefully monitored and planned. And I wanted to also mention about long COVID, and we're going to be hearing very shortly from Rebecca Logan about her experiences regarding her experience of having long COVID. But just to say that there's a lot of discussion, current discussion around about the similarities and the overlap, and post-exertional malaise seems to be linking the two together. And I would very much feel that strategies used to manage ME/CFS symptoms also have the potential to help those who are experiencing long COVID. However, just to recognise that we're dealing with the unknown, and hopefully we'll have a little bit of time to talk about this when we have discussions at our question time. And that's just a little last bit from me about service development given more resources within the trust that I'm working in, and also within the new trust, that I would hope to develop the programme into more of a two-tiered approach, adapting the current programme. So programme is slightly different for newly diagnosed people with ME/CFS, so that they have that very important early timely advice quickly and in a timely manner. And also being able to provide more longer term follow-up, patient needs led as a specialist occupational therapist. And that really is about enabling a person to check in if needed. And that's very much something that comes from my work. My patients, my clients need to be able to check in with somebody and check in about their activity levels and how they're managing, and to get some further advice and guidance regarding that. Need for much more research and ensuring everybody with ME/CFS in Northern Ireland has timely access to the ME/CFS programme. And thank you very much for listening. We're going to go on to questions shortly after the next two presentations, and that's my details if anybody would like to get in touch. I have lots of further resources that I can share. Thank you very much.
Just a tiny bit about me. I was a previously very fit and healthy person, and then developed sudden onset viral illness in 1999. I was extremely ill and bedbound for about a year, but then thankfully had a partial recovery to about 70% of my pre-illness levels. But unfortunately, because I didn't know, I had 3 attempts to go back to work to return to my career and normal life. And that resulted in a relapse and a further 7 years of being bedbound. During that time, I very slowly had a second partial recovery, but this time I only came back to about 30 to 40% of pre-illness energy levels. And that remains to today if I comply and live within my reduced energy envelope. If I don't, I pay dearly, and sometimes I'm not very good at complying to this illness, but anyway. So chronic fatigue has never properly explained my experience of post-viral illness, and that is 22 years to this very day. I am only one of the estimated 7,500 men, women and children in Northern Ireland with ME. Next slide, please, Graham. So it took quite a while and a lot of planning and a lot of thinking, and then I finally got a laptop in around 2009, I think it was, and the charity eventually then started, and the rest of it is history. We started in 2011, and it has grown from strength to strength, obviously because of the need out there. Next slide, Graham, please. So what do we offer patients? We were running monthly support group meetings in Newry with regular guest speakers, but since the pandemic hit, we immediately switched to Zoom. And our meetings and events were previously being live streamed before any pandemic. We live streamed out to our Facebook pages, simply to try and reach all our bed and housebound members all over Northern Ireland and further afield. We hosted annual conferences, raising awareness and tackling stigma by providing education events with international researchers and leading clinicians in ME and fibromyalgia, and we brought really the best in the world to Northern Ireland. We're also lobbying for specialist biomedical care in Northern Ireland so that the best physiological evidence is used to inform all care decisions. We also fundraise to support all of the above projects and towards biomedical research, of which we have sent about £18,000 over the years to various research facilities around the world. And thanks to Linda, we're also now collecting data and research from real patient experiences in Northern Ireland. Next slide, please, Graham. So what do we actually offer a patient, their family members and their carers? Information, education on self-management, support, way ahead of me, support, fellowship and opportunity to form new friendships, a safe environment to share tips and what others have found helpful, and encouraging volunteers to become more involved, trying to build up their confidence after a knock of chronic illness, pass on their skills and share talents. And in the images there are just some of the Facebook pages that we run The closed page for patients has just under 2,000 members at the moment. Then we also on the right have our announcements page where we would put out information like science breakthroughs or news on NICE guidelines. And in the bottom left there, some volunteers recently started a craft group, which is proven very, very successful, and again passing on skills to other members. And then in the middle bottom, we also run guided meditation and breath work classes on a Sunday evening. And then we also had open a special parents page where parents could discuss the issues specific to children. Next slide, please, Graham. We have a number of specialist advisors. Dr. William Weir, infectious disease consultant in London, who travels over to Belfast and runs private clinic here specifically for diagnosis. And he would offer home visits to very severely affected patients. We also have Dr. Nigel Spate, an NHS consultant paediatrician who is currently offering Zoom consultations since COVID, but referral has to be by GP. And he will liaise with any healthcare professional. He did one of our webinars and offered help to professionals too. We have our scientific advisor, Professor Brian Hughes, Professor in Psychology in Galway. And our scientific advisor, Dr. Von Spence, Founder and Director of ME Research UK. Next slide, please, Graham. So what would we do when patients ask us for help? We would signpost them to as many places as possible online, and that would include physios for ME, where, as Lorraine mentioned, they have information on pacing, heart rate monitoring, what exercise is appropriate and what is not, and what patients can do to help themselves. Next slide, please, Graham. So we offer, as the name implies, hope through medical professional education, and our 2-year project is about to be launched, and it's pretty unique, we think. Originally, it was to be patients being interviewed in their homes about their experience of ME, but the pandemic hit, so we had to be very innovative, and it's now animated VR headset that we hope and plan to send out to healthcare professionals. It's just a 6-minute, as I say, animated overview of our experience of the disease and real patient lives. Next slide, please, Graham. Again, offering hope through patients taking an active role in self-management and pacing while we wait on effective treatment, which hopefully will come soon now with all the research looking at post-viral illness. We have developed and sponsored an ME, post-viral fatigue and fibromyalgia profiles for an exciting new app. We're working with TIGA, an organisation in the UK, and this is about just to be launched too. The idea is to let patients record their activities throughout the day and actually see the good or bad outcomes of what they do, of pacing and activity management. It's very simple because it has to be with the cognitive issues that we all face. It's very quick and it's very effective to learn you how to live within this new small energy envelope of post-viral illness. Next slide, please, Graham. Offering even more hope through medical education. We did presentations at Queen's University for second-year medical students in 2018 and 2019, and we were actually invited back in 2020, but again, COVID has disrupted those plans. We gave out over 600 free information packs, and the feedback from students was one of very much gratefulness and actually sometimes shock when they learned of the seriousness of this disease. Next slide, please, Graham. And that's my final slide, and that's just a very short overview of what we do. We'd like to offer free info packs to any healthcare provider. Please just contact the charity via our website, or all the details are there. So I say this is a small sample of the work we do, and we very much thank you for listening and taking the time from your very busy schedule to attend today. Thank you.
So my name is Linda Campbell, and I am a volunteer healthcare professional, educational advisor and trustee for the Hope for ME and Fibro charity in Northern Ireland. My professional background is that of being an advanced nurse practitioner in primary care, and I currently work across 2 GP practices within the Down GP Federation. So what is the role of a volunteer healthcare professional educational advisor? Well, it's multifaceted. It's to promote the education and raise awareness of ME amongst all healthcare professionals and staff within primary and secondary care. It's to contribute to the education of all healthcare professionals at both undergraduate and postgraduate level on ME. It's to advise Hope for ME and Fibro Group on any new or changes to clinical and professional guidelines, advice, and research that are relative to people with ME, and to contribute to such guidelines, advice, and research. And the biggest piece of work really that we did over the last year was contributing to the feedback as our group, our charity organisation, on the ME CFS NICE guidelines. Additionally, the role is to carry out feedback surveys with people with ME to gauge their views on existing and future healthcare services, and I'll come back to that one. It's also about answering healthcare related questions from members that are within our competency to answer. So we do get a lot of people on the Facebook groups, both the closed and the open one, asking quite a lot of questions. I'm not a total expert in ME, don't profess to be. I'm coming at it from a professional experience, and also coming at it from the perspective of being a mother of a son who has ME. But there are many others out there that have much more knowledge and experience. So we would defer to those advisors, specialist advisors in our group as well for answers. And finally, the role is about promoting the benefits of Hope for Me and Fibro Northern Ireland support group and charity to a wide audience, to patients, families, carers, healthcare professionals, professional bodies, academic institutions, general public, Northern Ireland Assembly, Department of Health, goes on and on. It's never ending. So to go back to the point in green about carrying out feedback surveys with people with ME, I wanted to talk to you about a survey that we had carried out, myself and Hope for Me and Fibro, last year. And it was basically partly in relation to the role that I'm currently in working within primary care. And I also have the luxury of working within one of the new multidisciplinary teams in primary care, which consists of physiotherapists, mental health practitioners, social workers, practice-based pharmacists, myself as an advanced nurse practitioner, and all of the other primary care services that were already existing in GP practices. And outreach into the community as well. So what we wanted to find out was if we were to offer a multidisciplinary primary care based ME service, what would that entail? What did people want? Did they even want it? And if they did, what way did they want it delivered, and who did they want to see? And what were the issues that were of major concern to them? So I apologize for the next slide. It is rather busy, but I'll try and take you through it. So we carried out an online survey across all the BT codes in Northern Ireland with patients who had ME and asked for their preferences for this clinic. Now we had 69 respondents, which was pretty good. And this area on the left-hand side, this first table, was really, we asked people to indicate which healthcare professional would they prefer to see at a review, follow-up, support consultation. Unsurprisingly, GPs were at the top, ANPs were next, but this is what I want you to look at. Occupational therapists, where nearly 50% of people wanted to be seen by an occupational therapist. In this question, we asked, would people indicate what aspect of their NME health and well-being they felt they needed most support with? And as you can see, physical needs topped the table at nearly 93%. And psychological, I mean, it goes on. Other important things were home equipment adaptations aids, outdoor equipment adaptations aids, which are quite specific provisions and assessments that occupational therapists would provide. And one other comment was specific to occupational therapy as well, in that unfortunately a grant had been declined for outdoor home modifications. So moving on to the next slide, we asked the health what preference really patients had for a particular healthcare professional for a review appointment in relation to their specific health and support needs. So along the bottom, you can see all the healthcare professionals, and along the right-hand side is a list of all the different healthcare well-being support needs. Again, I mean, GPs were coming out the top that people wanted to see, advanced nurse practitioners, but there's occupational therapists, high demand and need in terms of physical, in terms of pacing methods and for activity and rest, nutrition and diet. Unusually, I don't know why that one was there, but also with regards to the equipment, home, indoor and outdoor equipment adaptations and aids. And the next slide, then we asked what healthcare professional would they prefer to see with regards their health and with symptoms of ME requiring support. And again, all the different practitioners were listed. At the bottom right-hand side was a list of all the specific symptoms that people with ME can experience. Again, doctors and AMPs seem to be the most professionals that people were asked saying they wanted to see most, but I think that was because they have been around a bit longer in practice. But look at occupational therapists. So topping the lead were things like post-exertional malaise that people needed help with, extreme fatigue, muscle pain. I think we also had sleep problems, short-term memory loss, poor concentration. So high demand and need, and I think it links in quite well with a lot of the descriptives that Kate and Lorraine have already given for what an OT does and can provide. And the last, well, not quite the last slide, but basically a summary of the implications for the provision and delivery of occupational therapy services. I think it's important to note the significance of the large percentage of people with ME, 48%, who would have chosen to see an OT at a follow-up appointment. Whilst it was not an option for the initial appointment, it is a concept needing exploration for the future provision of services for ME patients. The reason why I say it wasn't an option for initial appointment, it's not within the existing primary care multidisciplinary team. Now, that's not to say that they shouldn't be there. I firmly believe OTs should be there. There should be a lot of other allied healthcare professionals, but they aren't at the minute. But certainly we do have access to referring patients to OTs out in the community. But it just shows you patients wanted that access there and then. So the service needs evidenced by the respondents indicating that they needed support with home, outdoor equipment, adaptations, aids. It's further supported by the subgroup analysis that indicated a preference of healthcare professionals to see compared with their health and wellbeing support needs. And by ranking, that was GPs, ANPs and OTs for all aspects of health and wellbeing support requirements. And the last slide is really some patients' additional comments that were made in the survey. They're in a general format, but I think important I'm not going to read it through every single one of them. I think they're important that people recognize and understand the need that is still there for education, for services. There's also people recognizing they have had good input from healthcare professionals. And I think the last comment's the most telling of all. I feel if I was believed, then everything else would fall into place. And I think that's key to all of us as healthcare professionals to remember that. That's what patients want. that's what they're crying out for. If we can't even give them that basic right, then we're not off on a good foot. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you for listening.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rebecca Logan. I'm a 40-year-old wife, mum of 2 girls, aged 12 and 14, a nurse and a fitness instructor. Pre-COVID, I never stopped. I worked 12 to 18 hours each week as a bank nurse in the Ulster Emergency Department and taught 12 to 14 high-intensity fitness classes a week, including running my own fitness business. I loved my life. I was the happiest and fittest I'd ever been, doing 2 jobs that I loved, as well as having the flexibility to spend time with my family. Now I'm grieving for that life. 18 months ago, I tested positive for COVID-19 and now have long COVID. I'm 80% housebound unless someone can take me out, as I can't drive any distance. I use a stick and wheelchair to mobilise, and doing simple tasks such as washing my hair can result in severe fatigue and pain. Every day is a struggle. I waken each day feeling like I have the worst hangover. Sometimes turning over in bed is such an effort due to fatigue and pain in my body and muscles, I simply can't do it. Every day I suffer from crippling and debilitating fatigue, migrainous headaches, brain fog, muscle and joint pain, muscle tremors, breathlessness due to fatigue, constant ringing in my ears, and post-exertional malaise. Other symptoms come and go randomly, but these are the main ones that I have lived with daily for the last 7 months and are so debilitating that I have been unable to return to work, be the mum, wife, or friend I once was. My initial COVID infection was severe but didn't require hospitalisation. I did have to attend ED on day 14 due to an increase in breathlessness. I couldn't finish a sentence without gasping for breath. As a health professional, I was terrified at being admitted. I'd worked for about 4 weeks in COVID ED before testing positive and had seen the devastation that COVID caused firsthand. Thankfully, tests were okay and I was sent home. 3 weeks later, I had to return due to ongoing breathlessness, but again, tests were clear and I was told to have complete rest. It was at this point that I realised that I wasn't recovering as I'd expected. As with other illnesses I'd had in the past, I pushed through, went for short walks despite the breathlessness, racing heart and exhaustion. At this stage, long COVID wasn't a known illness. By September 2020, I felt I was about 70% recovered, so began teaching some fitness classes because I wanted to get the old me back. After 4 weeks, I started to crash. I suffered from extremely high heart rate, my lips were turning blue, and I was having to stop during a class because I was so exhausted. I cut my classes down and contacted my GP. Unfortunately, after explaining my symptoms, I was told I was most likely depressed and advised to take antidepressants and get on with my life. I was devastated and felt like I was going mad. I didn't know anyone else who'd had COVID and was like me. At the start of October, I had seen a news report about a programme that Northern Ireland Chest, Heart and Stroke were running for people who hadn't recovered from COVID. I contacted them and was accepted. The first conversation with my link person from the Breathing Better team at Chest, Heart and Stroke was amazing. It was the first time that I felt validated and listened to. I cried after the conversation because I was so relieved to hear that there were others like me and I wasn't imagining how I was feeling. I started the programme in November 2020 and it was a lifeline. Despite it being online, I connected with 14 others who were feeling exactly like me. We were an all-women group aged between 37 and 68, but the majority of the group were in their 40s. None of us had ever suffered from a chronic condition, so learning relaxation techniques to help with sleep, diet tips, goal setting and pacing were vital. It was a safe place to share with each other in what had been a very lonely journey. After 6 weeks of the programme, my health was worsening. I had to stop teaching and exercising. However, I asked the charity if I could keep the group going independent of them, as I felt that we all benefited so much from the group. 12 of us continued to meet weekly for about 5 months, and during this time I began to speak out on local and national media about the struggles of living with long COVID and the lack of support and services in Northern Ireland. Unintentionally, I have become an advocate for long COVID sufferers in Northern Ireland, which has taken a toll at times on my own health. I've met with MLAs and members of the Health and Social Care Board asking that services for long COVID sufferers be implemented urgently. I started asking about this in September last year. As a health professional, I am fully aware of the pressures the health service is under. However, I am disappointed that we are still with no official long COVID service in Northern Ireland, and that a charity solely funded by public donations has led the way with providing services from July 2020. Long COVID sufferers don't expect a miracle cure. They simply want tests to either diagnose a condition that has resulted from COVID or reassurance that they actually have long COVID. Validation is so important, and a health professional or team to listen, believe them, and have some sort of treatment pathway would be a start. Learning from the ME community would be beneficial. They have reached out to many with long COVID and advised against exercise therapy due to the many who suffer with post-exertional malaise. I am a perfect example of how exercise was not the answer for my recovery with COVID. My condition is worse now than it was this time last year, and I am sure that this is because I pushed through and exercised for 4 months until my body physically stopped. I had never heard of post-exertional symptom exacerbation in post-viral illness, but unfortunately I've had to learn the hard way. Living with long COVID is a daily roller coaster of symptoms and emotions. It not only affects the individual, but our family. There have been a few times over the last 18 months when I have told my husband that if it wasn't for him and my girls, I wouldn't want to continue living like this. After speaking out in the media, I've connected with over 30 sufferers from across Northern Ireland, and 2 weeks ago hosted a Zoom meeting. It's heartbreaking to hear our stories. We're all desperate to get our old lives back. It feels like our lives are on hold, but for how long? We are young, working-aged men and women who are shells of our former selves, unable to work and uncertain of what our future holds. We need support and guidance, medically, financially, and with regards to employment. It is exhausting researching ways to help ourselves and be continually dismissed and ignored. Long COVID is the aftermath of the pandemic. If we have to learn to live with COVID, then we need services to help those suffering to live with long COVID. Long COVID has given me a voice, and I will continue to use opportunities such as this to raise awareness, educate and advocate for sufferers like me.